The tank nobody respected. When this tank was first introduced, many military experts criticized it heavily. They said, it was too lightly armored, it was too small, its gun was too weak, it wasn't built for real war. Compared to heavier tanks rolling across Europe, this machine looked unimpressive. Some officers even believed it would be destroyed quickly in combat. Enemy commanders didn't fear it, soldiers joked about it, but war has a way of exposing the truth. The problem with first impressions. At the beginning of World War II, many armies believed tanks should be slow but heavily armored, equipped with massive guns, designed for direct frontal assaults. But this tank was different. It was fast, reliable, easy to produce, mechanically simple. Instead of brute force, it relied on mobility, and that difference changed everything. The battlefield test. When the fighting intensified, early losses hit hard. Some early versions of the tank did struggle against heavier enemy machines. Critics said, "We told you so." But something unexpected happened. The crews adapted. They stopped fighting heavy tanks head-on. Instead, they used speed, flanking maneuvers, surprise attacks, coordinated assaults. Suddenly, what looked like a weakness became an advantage. Mobility over muscle. Heavy tanks were powerful, but slow. This mocked tank could outmaneuver larger enemies, strike supply lines, exploit breakthroughs, surround isolated units. In fast-moving battles, speed often meant survival. Enemy crews found themselves being attacked from unexpected angles. Shots came from the side or rear, the weakest armor points. And when mobility combines with strategy, even a weak tank becomes deadly. Mass production, the real weapon. Another reason this tank became feared was not just performance, but numbers. While critics focused on armor thickness, factories focused on production speed. Thousands rolled off assembly lines. Commanders quickly realized, even if one tank wasn't the strongest, hundreds working together were unstoppable. Enemy forces suddenly faced waves of these machines, coordinated, fast, and relentless. Crew confidence. Something else changed. At first, crews were unsure about the tank's survival chances. But after seeing its mobility and reliability, confidence grew. Tankers began to trust the engine, trust the suspension, trust their tactics. Confidence transforms a weapon. A tank is not just steel, it's the men inside it. And once crews believed in it, its battlefield effectiveness multiplied. When mockery turned into fear, enemy intelligence reports began to change tone. Instead of dismissing the tank, they warned about rapid maneuver warfare, swarming tactics, high operational reliability. The same machine once laughed at was now responsible for destroying armored columns, breaking defensive lines, forcing strategic retreats. It wasn't the strongest tank on paper, but in real war, paper strength means nothing. Lessons from the killer tank. This story teaches something powerful. Appearances can deceive. Strategy matters more than size. Speed can defeat strength. Production wins wars. Military historians later concluded that this tank wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. It only needed to be reliable, fast, available in large numbers, used intelligently. And when those elements came together, the tank that everyone mocked became a killer. The moment everything changed. Every weapon has a moment that defines it. For this tank, that moment came during a major offensive. Enemy forces expected an easy victory. Their heavy armor dominated open fields. Their guns had longer range. Their commanders felt confident, but they underestimated one thing: adaptability. Instead of engaging in predictable, straight-line battles, tank units began operating in coordinated waves. Fast-moving columns avoided strong points and attacked where defenses were thin. What followed shocked everyone. The power of combined arms. The tank alone wasn't the killer. It became deadly because it was integrated into a larger system. Infantry protected it in urban areas. Artillery softened enemy defenses. Aircraft provided reconnaissance and support. Engineers cleared obstacles quickly. This coordination allowed the tank to move where heavier machines couldn't. In forest terrain, muddy roads, and broken landscapes, heavy tanks struggled. Engines overheated, tracks snapped, fuel consumption skyrocketed. But this once mock tank kept moving, and in war, movement is life. Learning from early failures. At first, the tank had real weaknesses: thin armor in early versions, mechanical issues in extreme conditions, limited firepower compared to enemy giants. But instead of abandoning the design, engineers improved it. New variants received stronger guns, improved armor angles, better suspension systems, upgraded engines. The design evolved quickly. By the time enemies adjusted to the original version, they were facing a much deadlier machine. Psychological warfare. Something else began happening. Enemy crews started fearing swarms of these tanks. Even if one wasn't stronger individually, multiple tanks attacking together overwhelmed defenses. Reports described sudden flanking attacks, fast encirclements, night maneuvers, surprise assaults in poor weather. Heavy tanks became cautious, and hesitation in battle is dangerous. The once laughed-at vehicle was now shaping enemy decisions. When strategy beat superiority. Many military planners before the war believed that bigger guns and thicker armor guaranteed victory. But this tank proved something different. Mobility plus coordination plus production greater than raw power. The battlefield wasn't a shooting competition. It was a chessboard. And this tank was a fast-moving piece that constantly forced the enemy to react. The industrial advantage. Factories adapted production lines for speed. Instead of building a small number of elite machines, they focused on simplified designs, easy repairs, standardized parts, rapid training for crews. Even damaged tanks were quickly repaired and returned to battle. The enemy might destroy one, but three more would appear. War became a numbers game, and this tank thrived in that environment. The turning of the tide. In several key battles, coordinated armored thrusts using these tanks achieved breakthroughs. Once a gap appeared in enemy lines, speed allowed deep penetration into rear areas, cutting supply lines, destroying communication hubs, encircling entire divisions. What began as mockery ended as respect and sometimes fear. The tank wasn't invincible, but it didn't need to be. It needed to be everywhere. The real killer was doctrine. In the end, the true killer wasn't just the tank itself, it was the tactics, the production strategy, the adaptation, the crew's experience. The tank became a symbol of modern warfare, proving that innovation doesn't always look impressive at first glance. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon is the one your enemy underestimates. The tank that was called inferior. When the Sherman entered World War II, critics compared it to powerful German tanks like the Panther tank and Tiger. On paper, the Sherman looked weaker. Thinner armor, smaller gun, early versions, higher profile, easier to spot, known to catch fire when hit, earning the nickname Ronson. German crews often believed a single Panther could destroy multiple Shermans, and in some one-on-one duels, that was true. But war isn't fought on paper. Normandy, where reality hit hard. During the invasion of France in 1944, especially after D-Day, Sherman crews faced brutal combat conditions in the hedgerows of Normandy. The battlefield was tight, visibility was limited, ambushes were common. German tanks, hidden behind thick cover, could fire first. Losses were heavy. For a moment, it seemed like the critics were right. But then, adaptation began. Tactical evolution. American commanders changed their approach. Instead of fighting Panthers head-on in open fields, Sherman units used numbers to overwhelm, coordinated with artillery and air support, attacked supply routes, targeted weaker flanks. Shermans rarely fought alone. They operated in groups. A Panther might destroy one tank, but three others would attack from different angles. Mobility turned into a weapon. Reliability, the hidden strength. German tanks were powerful, but complex. They broke down frequently, engines overheated, transmissions failed, spare parts were scarce. The Sherman, however, was mechanically reliable, easier to repair, simpler to maintain, produced in massive numbers. While a Panther might be superior in a duel, many Panthers never even reached the battlefield due to mechanical failure. The Sherman kept moving, and in war, availability beats perfection. The numbers game. The United States produced nearly 50,000 Shermans during the war. Factories in America operated at an industrial scale the world had never seen. When Germany lost a tank, replacing it was difficult. When America lost a Sherman, another was already on the way. Over time, this production advantage crushed opposition. Air superiority, the ultimate multiplier. By 1944 to 45, the Allies dominated the skies. Sherman units could call in airstrikes on German armor. Even the most powerful tank becomes vulnerable when fighter bombers attack from above. The Panther's thick frontal armor meant nothing against bombs and rockets. Shermans worked as part of a system, not alone, and that system became unstoppable. The psychological shift. At first, German crews mocked the Sherman. Later, they feared its numbers. Reports described American armored columns advancing relentlessly, day after day, with constant resupply and reinforcement. Even if a Panther destroyed several tanks, it was often isolated, outnumbered, or cut off. The war wasn't about the best individual machine, it was about sustainability. Not the strongest, but the most effective. History now views the Sherman differently. The technical comparison. Panther advantages: powerful, long-barreled 75mm gun, thick, sloped frontal armor, deadly at long range, excellent penetration power. Sherman advantages: mechanical reliability, faster turret rotation, better logistics, easier crew training, superior numbers. In a straight one-on-one duel at long range, the Panther usually had the edge. But war isn't a duel. Normandy's tight killing fields. The hedgerow country of Normandy changed everything. Dense bushes and narrow lanes meant tanks often fought at short distances. This reduced the Panther's long-range advantage. Sherman crews adapted quickly, moving in coordinated groups, flanking from side roads, using smoke to obscure vision, calling artillery on suspected positions. Instead of charging forward blindly, they hunted Panthers. And Panthers were not invincible. Their side armor was weaker. Their engines were prone to breakdown. If caught from the flank, even a Sherman could destroy them. The hidden weakness of the Panther. The Panther was powerful, but complicated. Its advanced engineering came at a cost. Frequent mechanical failures, difficult repairs in field conditions, high fuel consumption, limited spare parts. Many Panthers were abandoned not because they were destroyed, but because they broke down. Meanwhile, Shermans kept advancing. Reliability became a weapon. Air power changed the equation. By 1944, Allied aircraft dominated the skies over France. When reconnaissance spotted German armor, fighter bombers were called in. Panthers could defeat Shermans on the ground, but they could not fight the sky. Rockets and bombs turned even the most feared tank into burning wreckage. Shermans weren't fighting alone. They were part of a machine that included artillery, infantry, engineers, air support. The Panther was often isolated. The Sherman was supported. The numbers. Reality. Even if a Panther destroyed 3 or 4 Shermans in a battle, there were always more coming. The United States produced Shermans in massive quantities. Germany could not replace losses at the same speed. Over time, attrition favored the Allies, and war is often about endurance. The psychological shift. Early in the campaign, Sherman crews feared Panthers. Later, confidence grew. Improved versions like the Firefly variant mounted stronger guns capable of penetrating Panther armor. German crews began reporting being outmaneuvered, being outnumbered, being attacked from multiple angles. The tank that had once been mocked became part of an unstoppable wave. The bigger picture. The Sherman didn't win because it was the best tank in the world. It won because it fit America's strategy: industrial power, logistics superiority, combined arms warfare, mobility, and coordination. The Panther may have been superior in a duel, but the Sherman was superior in a war. The Eastern Front. Comparison. While the M4 Sherman fought in the West, another tank on the Eastern Front had already proven a similar lesson: the T-34. Like the Sherman, the T-34 was not perfect. Early versions had poor optics, limited crew visibility, cramped interiors. Yet it shocked German commanders during Operation Barbarossa. Its sloped armor and wide tracks made it ideal for muddy terrain. More importantly, it was built in massive numbers. The pattern was becoming clear. The war wasn't being won by the most complicated machines. It was being won by the most practical ones. The end of the myth. The myth of the invincible supertank slowly faded. German heavy armor like the Tiger I and Panther inspired fear, and rightly so. But fear doesn't equal victory. These tanks were expensive, difficult to maintain, slow to produce. Meanwhile, Allied factories kept producing Shermans at an industrial pace. By 1945, German crews often faced overwhelming armored formations. Even the best tank cannot survive when surrounded. The human factor. There's another truth often forgotten. A tank is only as good as its crew. Sherman crews received continuous training, learned from early mistakes, shared battlefield experience, operated within coordinated units. Morale improved as tactics evolved. Confidence replaced doubt. The tank that once carried fear now carried momentum. Strategy over strength. In hindsight, the Sherman represents something bigger than itself. It represents a shift in modern warfare: efficiency over complexity, mobility over brute force, logistics over individual superiority. The battlefield became industrial, and industrial power decided the outcome. The final lesson. History often celebrates the biggest guns and thickest armor, but real victory belongs to what works consistently. The Sherman wasn't glamorous, it wasn't unstoppable, but it was available, reliable, adaptable, supported, and that made it deadly. Closing. At the beginning of the war, it was mocked, compared unfavorably, laughed at, dismissed as inferior. But by the end, it was rolling through liberated cities. After the war, reputation versus reality. When World War II ended, debates began almost immediately. Veterans shared stories of burning tanks. Critics compared armor thickness charts. Historians analyzed battlefield statistics. And once again, the M4 Sherman was judged harshly. It was called undergunned, thinly armored, outmatched by German heavy tanks. But numbers told a different story. When analysts studied actual combat reports, they found something important. Most tank losses on all sides were caused by anti-tank guns, mines, artillery, airstrikes, not by tank versus tank duels. The myth of constant Sherman versus Panther showdowns was exaggerated after the war. Survivability was more complex. Early Shermans had a reputation for catching fire when penetrated, but improvements like wet ammunition storage significantly reduced that risk. By late 1944, Shermans were statistically no more likely to burn than many other tanks. Meanwhile, German heavy tanks often suffered catastrophic mechanical failures long before enemy fire destroyed them. Survivability wasn't just about armor thickness, it was about maintenance, logistics, recovery systems, crew replacement. And in those areas, the Allies had an advantage. The industrial war was the real war. World War II was not just fought on battlefields. It was fought in factories. American production lines could produce tanks faster than Germany could destroy them. Entire damaged Shermans could be repaired, refitted, returned to service. Germany, under constant bombing, struggled to maintain output. In the long run, the tank that could be built and repaired quickly became more valuable than the one that looked terrifying on paper. Lessons for modern warfare. The Sherman story influenced military thinking for decades. Modern armored doctrine now emphasizes reliability, ease of maintenance, interoperability with other units, combined arms coordination. Even today's advanced tanks reflect lessons learned from World War II. Because military planners understand something clearly, a weapon system must fit the strategy of the nation using it. The emotional truth. For the soldiers inside it, the Sherman wasn't a symbol. It was survival. Crews trusted it because it usually started when they needed it. It moved when ordered. It could be repaired. It had support. No tank feels safe when under fire, but reliability builds confidence, and confidence wins battles. Beyond steel and fire, we've talked about armor, we've talked about strategy, we've talked about production, but there's something more important than all of that. The men inside the M4 Sherman. A tank is not just steel, it's a crew of 5 human beings: commander, gunner, loader, driver, assistant driver. Inside that metal shell they faced deafening explosions, blinding smoke, heat that could suffocate, fear that never fully disappeared. When critics call a tank inferior, they forget who was inside it. Courage under fire. Sherman crews knew they were not driving the heaviest tank on the battlefield. They knew German armor like the Panther tank had stronger guns, yet they still advanced. They adapted, using speed instead of armor, using teamwork instead of brute force, using numbers instead of pride. They learned to flank, they learned to coordinate, they learned to survive. The real reason it became a killer, it wasn't because it suddenly became invincible. It became deadly because it was everywhere. It kept moving. It worked with infantry and air power. It returned to battle even after damage. And most importantly, because the crews believed in it. Confidence transforms a machine, the symbol of a different kind of power. The Sherman represents something larger than a tank. It represents industrial strength. It represents adaptability. It represents strategy over ego. While Germany focused on building fewer, heavier machines, the Allies focused on building enough machines to win an entire war. And that difference decided history. Final documentary outro. At first they laughed at it. They said it was weaker. They said it wouldn't survive. But war is not about looking powerful. It is about enduring. And when the smoke cleared across Europe, it wasn't the heaviest tank standing alone. It was the one that kept coming. Again, and again, and again. The tank that everyone mocked became a killer. History often glorifies the most intimidating machines, but wars are rarely won by intimidation alone. They are won by systems, by logistics, by coordination, by production. The tank that everyone mocked didn't become deadly overnight. It became deadly because a nation built an entire strategy around it, and that strategy worked. At the beginning of the war, it was mocked, compared unfavorably, laughed at, dismissed as inferior. But by the end, it was rolling through liberated cities. The tank that wasn't good enough helped crush one of the most powerful war machines in history. Sometimes the weapon everyone doubts becomes the one that changes.